All right, welcome back everybody. Richard Brubaker here, founder of Collective Responsibility with Ask the Collective 24. This week I'm here to address a question about, does CSR allow you to be bad? So if you invest in volunteering, if you invest in philanthropy, if you brand that program too much, does it allow you as a brand to be bad at the same time? This question came to us as kind of a response to the recent Freakonomics podcast where they ask, does doing good give you license to be bad? And it's a discussion about the role of corporate social responsibility and the wider debate about whether or not corporate social responsibility programs, their reports, really make the firm any better. In opening up this discussion, I want to flip the question a little bit from, does doing good give you license to be bad, to does doing good make you really any better? In thinking about this, I immediately went to a top 10 list by Forbes and another one by Smart Resources, which I'll link below. And they kind of had some really strong brands: Ben & Jerry's, Bosch, Starbucks, IKEA, Salesforce, Levi, BMW, Google, Virgin Atlantic. You know, these are all firms that came up in the top 10. They seem to be in both of them. And I want you to think for a second, like, for the most part, I would agree that these are good companies, and I would agree that they definitely have good brands. But does their CSR program, or does being ranked on a top 10 CSR list make their brands any better? When I think of Starbucks, they're doing an amazing amount of work in a lot of the social issues, but does the work that they do with veterans, with migrants, with single mothers, does all that absolve them of the paper cups? And I think of Google, do no evil. Does the fact that they do so much in their communities absolve them of the recent, challenges they had around the Pentagon program? Now, I'm not saying that any of these companies are evil, but at the same time, I want to throw those examples out to kind of show that there is a balance here that we need to really dive into a little bit deeper. When I look at that top 10 list, I think it's really important to understand that there's a context by which CSR fits into the wider activities of a firm. And that by looking at that one thing, I think in isolation, is a bit unfair. As someone who spent the last 15 years in corporate social responsibility or helping firms through this process, is actually very difficult. And it's often stop and go, stop and go. It's almost 95% incomplete in process. It's never perfect, and that's also part of the challenge. And two examples I'll give is, we worked with a pharmaceutical company about 10 years ago. We're helping to localize their US-based program into China. It wasn't an exact fit, but they knew that they had something at the core, which was STEM, and teaching STEM to children. Now for them, they had to find a way to get that into the local market, so they had to find a partner. The second thing is, they had to find champions within the business who would take their time out to support this, as well as their money to support this, and drive this program. In the US, it had a history of multiple years, decades, but in China it was new. So again, in your fastest growing market, those executives, they had a time constraint, they had a budgetary constraint. They also had to engage their employees. Their employees were the volunteers that were basically going to staff this project and drive all this impact. And throughout this process, we really had to make sure that everyone knew what the process was, why this program was important, what the impact would be, what their expectations of giving would be, and what they would get in return. It was a constant process. Now, it was done well. We had the right partner, we ended up finding the right champions, and for the first 3 cities, it was no problem finding the volunteers. And that set up the foundation so that the second year, the next 10 cities took off. And then over the next 3 to 5 years, what we actually found was that this program was so successful within a Chinese government nonprofit that it went to more than 50 cities. So the last area that I look at often when I'm trying to assess whether or not a brand is doing it in the right way, if they're doing too much, too little, if they're trying to take too much credit, is I'll just look at the communications itself. How are they communicating CSR, sustainability, and the work that they're doing? Do they have the right intent? Have they got a good program? Is the program short-term, long-term, one-off event? Does it make sense for their brand? Do they have the right partners? Are they really supporting those partners, or are the partners getting is the program size smaller than the budget for marketing the program? And the third is, what is the actual impact? And is that impact one that reaches into the business model? Now I'm going to move away from CSR for a second. I'm going to talk about plastic. A lot of brands right now are talking about how their plastic straws are going to be banned by 2018, 2019, 2020, or their plastic water bottle is going to be 50% recyclable by 2020, 2025. If I look at these and I look at the brands who are involved in making the statements, the first question I always have is their announcement solving the problem? If not, I'm not saying don't do it, just don't make it more than what it is. Say you're on a path, say you're doing your best to understand the issues, say you're doing your best to build a process whereby you can become a solution provider over time, and then be very honest about the work that's been done to date and the impact that's been seen to date. That for me is the right way. But saying that you're banning plastic straws because you stand in solidarity with the poor fish, seals, and other animals with plastic in their bellies, when you have 32 other items that are plastic in nature or disposable in nature, that's where the separation comes in, where that question that Freakonomics was asking becomes more relevant. So wrapping up, I want to kind of close with something I've said at the closure of a lot of my presentations, which is CSR does not need to be sexy. It doesn't need to win awards. It doesn't need to be innovative. It does need to be aligned to core values of the organization. It does need to have programs that have depth and duration. It does need to have an impact. And it does need to be engaging. So with that, I'd like to thank you again for joining us for Ask the Collective 25. Really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed the framework, but also the tips and tricks that I kind of built into this one. Please keep sending your questions, make them tactical, make them strategic. Either way, I'm here to answer your questions. Thank you very much and have a great week.